Well, the United Nations is now warning that Zimbabwe is facing another poor harvest this year due to patchy rainfall. It compounds the problems for millions already grappling with drought conditions and the worst economic crisis this country has seen in a decade. Across the nation, at least 7.7 million people in urban and rural areas are severely food insecure, including over 3.8 million children who are hungry and require urgent food assistance. To discuss this further, we're joined in studio by Save the Children South Africa's Communications Manager, that's Mr. Sibusiso Khasa. Good afternoon, Sbu, and thank you so much for your time on the SABC News Desk. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Sbu, let's start. There's a drought, rampant inflation, hyperinflation, some people are calling it, rolling blackouts. It really is a recipe for disaster at this point in Zimbabwe.
Yes, it is a dire situation, and in fact we are mainly worried about the children. The figures that you've just quoted right now, about 3.8 million children who are severely food insecure, and that now is forcing many parents, for instance, to take some of the children out of school because now they can't pay school fees. So now they are forcing them to go seek work, and child labor is an issue that we take very seriously as Save the Children. We work against that in most of our projects and programs. So now what we are calling for international donors and international community to try and assist in terms of easing the situation in Zimbabwe, because now also some parents, especially for girls, now they are more exposed to issues of early child marriage, because some parents will sell them off to wealthier families to forced marriages, and some of the wealthier men may also see them as vulnerable, so target them for sexual exploitation.
And this is just it, isn't it, Sibusiso? Because this kind of struggle when it comes to survival, or the struggle for subsistence among our most vulnerable, like you mentioned, the very young and the elderly, it really it affects the children's well-being and their self-respects, and it does, like you say, create behavior and conditions that violate their human rights, especially when it comes to when they start to take into account their coping mechanisms, for example, dropping out of school or early marriage or even sex trade to obtain food.
Yes, that's correct, because the other issue is that now such situations, they also force some children, for instance, to decide to migrate, for instance, unaccompanied. We've seen some coming to South Africa, for instance, because of such push factors. And once you are unaccompanied, you face various challenges as a child. You go to a foreign country, you don't know anyone there, and also you trying to survive. So now you find that some people will obviously exploit them. If it's girls, it's going to be sexual exploitation. If it's a boy, mainly it's forced labor. So it is a really situation that we are worried about.
I wonder if you would know this information to share with us, but public schools in Harare were busy rolling out public schooling feeding schemes. Is that still going on at this point?
Yes, some of the programs that are run by government, they are still continuing, but some subsidies have been stopped recently. So it also it creates a situation whereby even if you are at school as a child, you won't be able to, for instance, focus, because obviously you can't focus on an empty stomach. So it creates a situation whereby it's not only affecting the health of the child and their growth, but also their education. So it is a situation that needs urgent attention.
All right, so people in urban areas as well as rural areas are really hit hard, and I know your teams are conducting assessments in both these areas. Can you give us an idea of the challenges your teams face and those of the people in both these circumstances?
Okay, so far what we've already seen, some we've already mentioned them, like some parents, for instance, forcing their children to forced marriages so that they can get some money, because some families are wealthier, so that's why they would do such things. Others, they are already selling off their livestock, which is now a situation that creates for instance, it's if you live on something and now you're forced to sell it as in completely. it creates that situation at a lesser price, for instance. And also the issue of the food prices, which are quite high in the country.
Yes.
It really creates a situation whereby most of the children are really at risk, and now we don't want to see loss of life, for instance.
All right, the appeal for international funding is out. Can you speak to us about the ramifications for your organization in particular if that funding doesn't come about, and also what help are you receiving from the Zimbabwean government themselves?
Okay, in most cases we rely on different donors and some aid from the European Union, for instance. So that on its own, when you talk of issues of funding, the reason why we are appealing, that means there's a lack of funding. So that's why we issued this call to say Zimbabwe needs urgent help. That's why we're calling on all donors, and also we're calling on the international community to assist in this particular situation, because you do have your World Food Program as well. They are also working with us on the ground.
Yes.
They are assisting in terms of relief. So that's why we just need more funding to deal with the situation.
All right, Sibusiso Khasa, Save the Children South Africa's communications manager, joining us on the desk this afternoon. Thank you for your time on the SABC News Channel.